One of the things that we were just talking about, well, you guys were talking about was Reiki. I have no idea what that is. What is Reiki? What does that mean?
Okay, so Reiki, to describe Reiki, it would be to say that, we all know we have a physical body. We all know we have, our organs and everything. But we don't usually take into consideration what Eastern traditions have known for some time. And that's that there is layers of our body that is beyond the physical body. You could call them subtle layers or energetic layers. And generally, these layers are affected by our thoughts and emotions before our physical body is. So normally in a healthy individual, we have energy constantly flowing through the body. That would make you feel, you'd wake up with a sense of alertness, feeling content with your life, happy, an overall general sense of well-being. Sometimes what happens is through emotions or traumas in our lives and various forms of stresses that we can't really learn to release.
And mental.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just sometimes we don't really release those things. We don't have a way to take an external circumstance and deal with it or cope with it in a way that's healthy for us. So what we do is we end up burying it, or in the Reiki world they call it an energy block. We would end up stopping that flow of natural energy that's flowing through our body. When this happens, that's when you start to feel various I want to say symptoms of different things. It depends. The way that the Reiki system works is it depends on different parts of the body, and those parts are called chakras. They govern different aspects of the body and the different aspects of the human being, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And these things with Reiki, it's an understanding that there is a universal life force energy, whatever you want to call it, God, spirit, chi in some cultures, mana. This energy is accessible through just pure intention, and we could go in and we just use laying on of the hands, as the Christian tradition would call it. But this is just putting your hands down in certain areas and allowing that universal energy to flow through a practitioner that is attuned to this energy. And that gives you a sense of bringing back that balance within the body, within the physical body, generally after a Reiki session. I don't really know. Do you have anything to add to that, Theresa? I'm not sure.
Well, I think that was a great explanation, actually, because I think that most people, don't. Some people don't even know what Reiki is and have never heard of it. People who are in maybe an alternative world and have had alternative healings have used it for many things. It could be very helpful with, alleviating distresses, like you said, mental health, and there is a relationship in my background between the mind and the body, and also the spirit. So from my perspective in training, the mind and what we think about every day, the level of stress we have really impacts our body on a whole. And we have a number of disease states today, cardiac and diabetes, and people that are dealing with emotional levels of traumas in their world, or overeating for emotional reasons, or we're just not having the energies that we had at one point, and we're not living the way that we were designed to. We were not meant to sort of work and die, and this is the kind of reasons why we're kind of getting together and talking about these main questions, especially related to what he said about Reiki, is that these level of mental stresses really impact inflammation in the body, and our body goes into a state of what I would call under stress is an androgenic effect. So we've got stress hormones, and we've got all kinds of major problems in the way that our body runs. So energy, can be utilized in the body to actually help alleviate some of that stress and to get the body flowing in different ways. It is an alternative holistic approach. And some people who've experienced it, I've had Reiki myself, feel it as much as I would go to a massage therapist, or I would exercise and maintain my wellness. It can be as effective as you think it can be. And what we know about perception and our thinking is that our perception of events is really our reality. so what you believe can be true. But there's also research to indicate that, many other things are effective as well. So it's just one of those things that it depends on your exposure and experience. But that's really what Reiki is.
And to kind of add upon that, I think it's important to note about just the body in general, that we, knowing that we have these bodies, these subtle bodies behind the physical, understanding that first what happens to us is we either bury energy or we allow ourselves to allow the energy to be blocked within us, and then if we keep ignoring it and not allow it to come up and to be acknowledged but consciously and released, what we do is we then allow ourselves to develop physical ailments. That's the view from the Reiki perspective, that energetically speaking, things develop there in that realm first. And if it's ignored for so long, will then manifest in the physical. Their explanation for all kinds of cancers, all kinds of diseases, all kinds of absolutely anything in the body has an energetic, any kind of ailment in the body had an energetic starting point that was either ignored or just wasn't taken care of, and that eventually developed into the physical. So Reiki is, in a sense, kind of, that's where it fits into the holistic practice, where you take care of yourself to prevent illness rather than wait till you're hurting and then go for it.
One of the things that I think that would be a great segue to bring up, and I've talked about it before, is this woman, Anita Morjani, and I started talking about that a little bit before. And this woman lived over in Hong Kong. She was Indian of descent, and she's a national icon right now. I mean, she's published a best-selling book called Dying to Be Me. You can find it everywhere. She's got YouTube, and she's been on TED Talks, and there's no mistaking what has happened to her. So medical science and medical cannot disprove what's going on with her. So what happened to her in her life, to kind of have a synopsis, is that she had stage 4 lymphatic cancer, and her body was basically riddled with tumors. We're talking lemon-sized, kind of tumors up into her neck. She had bed sores. She was 85 pounds. She spent 4 years of horrific treatment through chemotherapy, and it was not effective in alleviating this cancer. And when she was at her near death, she went into a coma. And so she describes that experience, and she kind of was aware completely of the doctors, of her room, that she had been laying there. She saw herself laying there. She was aware of everyone else's thoughts around her collectively. She then went into a state of pure connectedness to what I would consider collective consciousness or consciousness, where her body and mind no longer existed. She felt connected to the source of all things. She said it was God. She talked about how it was a sense of love, that's an essence, is what she's talking about, and that she felt completely safe and wrapped in unconditional love that she had never experienced in her entire life. Then she says that her father, who had passed away, and her best friend that had passed away, sort of emerged in this essence form, and they kind of told her, you're not ready, it's not your time to go. And she suddenly began to become aware in that state that she actually had almost given herself cancer. She became aware that she had lived such a life of fear. She was afraid of what other people thought of her. She was afraid to do anything. She was very afraid. She lived a very fearful life. We are indoctrinated in fear in our society. We have a diet, steady diet every day, not only on the news, but with each other. I almost feel like we're so disconnected from each other because we feel like someone's going to hurt you, or we're so afraid of each other because of the level of media and other forms that really take us away from each other, and that there's something to be watched. We can't trust each other. So she talks about this experience and said that this inflammation and this whole process took her body as a toll. And this is sort of what you're talking about, Albert, is that this energy sort of, over time in the body emerges, this level of stress in her mind and her body and her soul all kind of combine into this level of cancer. No one in her family had a history. There's no biological explanation why she had cancer, really. So at this point, she basically knew that when she came back to her body, she would be healed. She talks about that experience. and it can be found on YouTube for more information. But she talks about the experience, and she came back to her body, and she knew she would be healed. And within 5 days, I believe, like 70% of her tumors were sort of alleviated. And then within 5 weeks, she was discharged from the hospital. Now, medical science doesn't have an explanation for that. And these are the kind of experiences and the kind of miracles that are occurring more and more that we need to understand. What is going on here? What is the explanation to how this is occurring? And our paradigm right now and our paradigm in this world is not fitting what we know to be true. So whether your, spirituality or, overall how your sense of connectedness to each other. And so that's kind of an example of what I think is just out there just a little bit.
And I think that makes sense when you talk about like the current paradigm and things like that, because there's always like a pushback from the current frame of thinking to anything new. I mean, at one point in time, they actually thought that washing your hands before a new surgery would actually somehow damage the next patient, that you should actually go in with bloody instruments and tools from your last patient. They thought that, and I can't remember his name, but the guy who actually came up with the concept of sterilization, they thought he was crazy. They wanted to take away his medical license. So, I mean, what we're talking about
isn't welcomed usually.
What we're talking about in terms of a spiritual sense, I think that there's no reason that at some point in time that can't be quantified.
Right.
And I think I touched on it before that a lot of people aren't going to accept those things until there is some sort of quantifiable measurement of it.
Or they experience these things for themselves.
Absolutely. And it doesn't sound crazy to think that the way that you think and the way that you act towards life, and sometimes the way that life acts towards you, could physically affect you. We know that's true. I mean, if you're stressed, you'll have high cortisol levels, et cetera, et cetera. So that makes total sense to me.
Right.
But how would you explain to a person who is 100% skeptical about these kind of things? How would you, in a scientific sense, explain it to them?
Well, I think that you're actually answering some of those questions. So I would say, well, okay, let's look at history, and let's go back. And if we don't really examine where we've come from, we don't know where we're going. And so as a whole, and I'll take spirituality on a side, I'll look at science, because that's sort of my background, right? So I want to say, okay, at some point we thought the world was flat for hundreds and hundreds of years until disproven. And then science sort of went and said, okay, that's not true anymore. And then, discoveries like that, gravity and Newton and Pythagoras, and, I'm kind of jumping in history, but, we go along and we really didn't understand things until we knew it. And this is sort of the truth of what I think is the connection. And you and I alluded to that before, Albert, about the understanding that, God, the Bible, Buddhism, Taoism, ancient mysticism, modern technology, science, and modern medicine all are connected. They all have a place, and they're you cannot have one without the other. At one point, I would say to somebody who's a skeptic, wait, I mean, it is a process where we all have our own choice, and I have no need to control anyone else's thoughts. However, I would say experience it for yourself, and there's many ways to experience it, and I think you could probably allude to that. But, what I want to finish on that, and I'll let you kind of jump on that because that's a perfect understanding, is that, ancient mysticism at some level before, Christ kind of was here, and before we have that understanding of him coming, and before religion in some ways, we had, Native Americans were connecting with the source of spirituality. We had ancient mysticism, and we didn't understand what that was labeled. We just labeled it as we knew it was then. So they talked about gods and the earth and sun, but that's what they knew then. They didn't have a name for it. They just knew it was energy, maybe. They just knew that there was a connectedness between somewhere in the heavens and somewhere in earth. And that's sort of the way that things are now. And I think that we're going to find out eventually, as we merge in our future, that ancient mysticism was just as viable as, Christianity and Christ consciousness, and where we are going with that in terms of modern technology, and that somehow man has sort of hijacked the divisiveness of those concepts and made us fight against each other, when really we are all connected and one, and all have a place on this earth together.
Absolutely.
But experiencing it for yourself.
Yeah. So experience is in the ancient traditions, in the shamanic traditions, experience was, your measure of truth. It was you go out and you do these things and you experience them for yourself and then decide what's true for you. And whatever is working for you is your truth. It doesn't matter what tradition it comes from. It doesn't matter if you pull knowledge from multiple traditions and you just pull bits and pieces from each. You know, whatever works for you is your truth, is how they taught it. Now, as far as your question goes with, you know, how would you relate, like how would you explain spirituality? How did that question go? What was your question?
To a skeptic.
Yeah, to a skeptic.
Like what would you say?
You would say, I would say, I'll give you some of the tools that I have personally to look at the world, and I would give you some techniques to practice. And I would say go out and practice them for yourself and see what kind of results you get, and experience the stuff for yourself. And I believe actually even Buddha said it. You know, he said, don't follow me, don't believe what I say. Go out and do it for yourself and get your own experience. Because in all actuality, for us to be able to do some of these things that are more on the realms of what some would call magic or unproven physics, is that we need to be able to have the experience and believe down to our own core as individuals that this stuff is possible. And in order for that to happen, I think it's safe to say, you know, we need our own experiences to do it. How we gain the experiences, that's where you go and you play around a little bit and you kind of look within yourself and try to find passions of your own and things that kind of guide you on a little journey. Find your own.